All right, everybody. So Chainsaw Man, the movie Reze Arc is coming out on October 24th. So we're going to go over everything that happened in season 1. So that means episode 1 through 12. So you are caught up to speed by the time you are ready to watch the movie. But anyways, jumping into episode 1, we kick off the episode with a very eerie dream of our main character named Denji, who is walking down a very creepy alleyway until he reaches a door. But before he's able to open that door, he wakes up. And this is where we get the reality in which Denji lives, and he lives in a very rundown shack, and he is not doing the best when it comes with livable situations. But now it's time for him and his trusty companion Pochita to go to work. So as Denji is walking to work, we are given the reality of the situation and seeing how deep in debt he is. But this isn't his debt. It is his father's debt that he inherited after his father took his life. So overall, he owes over 38 million yen to the Yakuza. And Denji right now is just going down the list of things that he has sold in order to pay off his debt. And I'm not talking about just random things he's found around to pot off. These are actual body parts of his that he sold. For example, he sold his kidney for 1.2 million yen. He sold a eye for 300,000 yen. He sold a nut for 100,000 yen. And despite all that, he's barely even put a drop in the bucket for the actual amount that he owes. But anyways, moving on, he makes money by cutting down trees and even taking on odd jobs that pays the most, which is devil hunting. And we see him actually finish one job killing the tomato devil. And as for how much they would have paid him for that job, it would have been 400,000 yen. But when you calculate things like fees and interest and stuff that the Yakuza ends up doing to him, he's only given 75,000 yen. So now you can realistically see how near impossible it is for him to pay off his debts because they're doing things like this to him in order to keep him working for them longer. And then we get a quick little flashback of how Denji actually meets Pochita when he was a child. Where he meets Pochita is actually at the grave of his father, and Pochita is revealed to be the Chainsaw Devil. And though Pochita is in a very weakened state, Denji, despite knowing what devils are, he actually takes Pochita and offers his own blood to it so he can heal it. And from that moment forward, they become basically partners in crime. They hunt devils together, they sleep in that little shack together, they do everything together. And at this point, Pochita is Denji's only friend, family, anything that he can truly rely on and know that this is the one thing that truly loves him. So the one thing that we do learn very early about Denji in terms of his dreams is the fact that he doesn't want fame or power or even money in the sense of being rich, but he just wants a normal everyday life. He even goes as far as to just saying that he just wants bread with jam and a warm bed and maybe even a girlfriend. And by comparison to what many other people want, these are just some simple desires and shows how little he's ever had. But anyways, one night Denji is woken up by the Yakuza boss who is trying to bring him on for his next job. So the next devil job that is meant to pay him more is actually in this very eerie abandoned warehouse. And once they're inside, the truth is revealed and oh boy. It turns out that the Yakuza made a deal with the zombie devil to gain even more power, and the zombie devil hates devil hunters. So what the Yakuza ends up doing is basically giving Denji over to the zombie devil to appease him. And you can probably see where this is going, but now Denji is just getting stabbed up like a pincushion. And now you have all of these zombies just hacking away at him while Denji is just actively trying to run away. And all Denji is thinking about is just like, I never wanted any of this. I just wanted a normal life. Why do I have to go through this? And in the end, when Denji is just chopped to pieces, they throw him in a dumpster, leaving him to presumably die. So as Denji lies dying, that's when we see a flashback with him and Pochita. And in that flashback, Denji tells Pochita that if he ever dies, Pochita can have his body in order to survive. But then something crazy happens. Pochita begins talking, and instead of taking over Denji's body to survive on its own, Pochita chooses to fuse with Denji and tells him, you can have my heart as long as you show me your dream. And then in the dumpster, we're seeing Denji's body being basically put back together with these chain links. And then Denji bursts out of the dumpster and he looks down at the pull cord and he realizes what happened. And that's the fact that Denji's heart is now Pochita. And now realizing that Denji is not dead, the zombie devil is kind of confused, and he sends all of his zombies back to Denji, so then hopefully they can finish the job. And this is when Denji turns into Chainsaw Man for the very first time. And it's a pretty cool transformation, and Denji is not fully there because he immediately realizes if he takes down all the Yakuza here and now, then his debt is wiped clean. He won't owe anybody anymore. And the idea of that, you know what? This is the part where I'll actually play the audio of Denji's live reaction to this realization because it's nuts. But after Denji takes down all the zombies and Yakuza members, the next day is finally here, and that's when Makima arrives with two other members called the Public Safety Devil Hunters. And they enter the warehouse and they immediately just see the carnage left behind, and it's crazy, but the one thing that they do see still standing is one more devil. And that devil turns out to be Denji, but he is just in a daze at this point. And the two public safety devil hunters look over at Makima and they're like, should we kill this thing? And Makima fearlessly just walks up to Denji despite him looking insane right now. She's able to basically just check his scent and confirms that Denji is both human and devil. And then after she's closed the gap between herself and Denji, Denji is just, again, he's exhausted at this point, and all he just says is just, hug me. And without any hesitation, Makima hugs him. And that's when Denji turns back to normal and the chainsaw transformation pretty much just melts off of him. Now at this point, Makima just gets straight to the point and tells Denji, you have two options. You can either be disposed of as a devil, or you can be kept as a human and fed. And Denji is, again, we know what he wants. He's a very simple guy. He simply asks Makima, what would breakfast be like? And Makima says the perfect thing if you remember what Denji brought up earlier. And she says that she will get him some bread with butter, a salad, coffee, maybe even some dessert. And upon hearing this, Denji agrees to go with her. And that is officially where Denji decides to leave behind his old life and become part of public safety. Thus brings us to episode 2. So after joining public safety, Denji rides with Makima in her car to Tokyo, and he's told now that he is hers. And this is where things get a little weird. Since Denji is now hers, he must answer either with a yes or a woof, since she doesn't want a dog that says no. And Denji doesn't waste time saying woof, I'll tell you that. They take a quick pit stop, and Makima actually gives Denji her coat, since at this point he's still shirtless. And all things considered, despite the weird little dog dynamic, she's actually pretty nice to Denji. And Denji's able to already feel himself being drawn closer and closer to Makima, and I don't blame him either, just because of the fact, with how he's been brought up. This is the first actual person who has not treated him harshly. But anyways, once they get to where they're going to eat, Denji faints from all the blood loss. And understandably curious, Makima just straight up asks Denji how he became this way. And that's where Denji ends up revealing to the first person that Pochita replaced its heart with Denji so Denji could live. And this is where Makima notes that she believes that Pochita is still alive inside of him instead of it being a sacrificial thing, but it's kind of like a coexistence. And she bases this off of the fact that Makima can sense within Denji that he is both human and devil. And that would also back Denji's belief that Pochita is still very much alive as well. And that makes him feel better about this whole situation. Since he can't have Pochita physically by his side, this is like the next best thing. But anyways, poor weak Denji is able to get Makima to feed him some udon, and he does the woof again, and oh my god. Anyways, fast forwarding, Denji ends up asking Makima, what type of men that she likes, and Makima Oh god, she tells Denji that she likes the dingy types, and man, she's good. Okay, she's good. She knows how to control people. I'll just say that. Always telling people what they want to hear somehow. But this just fuels Denji's attraction to her because he just keeps feeling that she likes him and that maybe there is something there to be explored other than the master pet dynamic that Makima is alluding to with the whole wolf thing and Denji being hers. But either way, moving on, the two of them finally make it to Tokyo, and basically Makima is giving Denji the rundown of public safety and the benefits of being in public safety, just getting him fully onboarded in so he's not completely out of his element, even though he is technically just because of his upbringing. But she ends up giving Denji his own uniform and then introduces him to one of our supporting characters, Aki Hayakawa. But Denji doesn't really care about Aki that much. All he wants to do is just be as close to Makima as possible. Yeah, that's unfortunate because Aki is very quick to let Denji know that's not how things work here. But moving forward with the conversation, Makima tells Aki that Denji is pretty special. And because of that, he's going to be pairing Denji up with Aki, and Aki does not like that. But since it's Makima, he ultimately ends up obliging, and they're going to be unfortunate partners. But Makima does end up telling Aki that if Denji, for whatever reason, becomes insubordinate, or if he tries to quit public safety, then what they will do is just treat Denji as a devil and take him out. Or more specifically, Makima will be the one to kill him as a devil. So in the meantime, what's going to happen is Makima is directing Aki to basically put him under his wing and even live with Aki so he can properly be monitored. And again, Aki is just... he hates this whole idea, but since it's Makima, he goes along with it. And now moving on, it's time for their first mission together. And before they can even get there, there's already some problems. And it all begins at the point where Denji asks Aki if Makima has a boyfriend, and Aki doesn't like that in the slightest. So he takes Denji in an alleyway, smacks him one good time across the face that sends Denji flying into some trash, and he just demands that Denji quits. He basically tells Denji that he is in public safety for the wrong reasons, whether it's for money or otherwise, and that's how people get themselves killed in this line of work. And in Aki's eyes, if you don't have a solid purpose, then this life is not for you. And in response to that, Denji makes it very clear that he has every intention of staying. And he gets up and he just runs straight towards Aki and kicks him straight in the nuts multiple times. But Aki is not exactly backing down and straight up tells Denji that he should not be trying to chase after someone like Makima. And Denji basically counters that by calling Aki jealous. And mind you, Denji is still just constantly kicking this dude in the nuts. I don't know how many times he actually does it. But at the end of it, Aki just tells Denji, I'm going to tell Makima on your ass. And when they do come back to Makima's office, Denji is holding up Aki and says that he got attacked by the nut devil. But anyways, going forward to their first actual mission, they find themselves at a home to take down a fiend. Now, what a fiend is a devil taking over a human corpse. So Denji and Aki goes inside, and Aki tells Denji, now's the time for you to show me what you got. Show me Chainsaw Man. Show me what Makima sees in you that makes you special. But Denji actually ends up refusing and ends up using his axe. And that's for the reason he says simply that is because when he does turn into Chainsaw Man, blood gets everywhere and things get messy. All in all, he just wanted to make the job taking down the fiend clean and straight to the point. And in response to that, Aki just basically calls Denji naive and that fiends, devils, they don't deserve mercy or clean deaths or anything like that. They deserve to be disposed of. And the reason why he believes that these devils don't deserve mercy is because his family was also killed by a devil. Denji then poses the question that if it's possible for him to actually be friends with a devil, where Aki warns him that such line of thinking can get him killed. And when Aki finally leaves Denji in the room alone, we get the real reason as to why Denji didn't transform, and that is because he didn't want to dirty the magazines that the fiend left behind. Yeah. But anyways, as Denji is looking at these magazines, he is fueled with his next dream, and that is to touch Makima's chest. Yeah. And what really gets him believing that this is a realistic goal is the fact that now he has this newfound life and all these opportunities. This can be something realistic that he could look forward to that he probably couldn't have, honestly, definitely couldn't have during his previous life. But now that he does have this proper life, it seems pretty realistic for him. And that's when he officially locks in his new goal of fondling some chests. And now it's time to finally meet back with Makima. But this is not just a normal meeting. We are getting a new partner. And this partner isn't a normal human like Aki. This one is a fiend. And then in bursts Power. And at first, Denji really didn't care until he realized Power's a girl. Girls have chests. And he looks down at her chest and she's like, you know what? Welcome to the team. Now, in regards to this very new makeshift team that's going on right now, the reason that Makima gives into why this team is so unique is that she wants to create a powerful unit. And what she's creating with Aki and Denji and Power is purely experimental to see if something like this can work. And fingers crossed, to see if something like this can show results. Now, as for why Power is allowed to exist in the first place is the fact that Power is known to be very rational compared to the fiend that we saw them take out earlier in the episode. And also, she's under the same stipulations that Denji's in. If she doesn't follow orders, she'll be exterminated. But before she allows them to leave, she does let them know that this is purely an experimental team. So if they do not show results, they're done. But anyways, after the meeting, Makima sends Power and Denji to patrol a designated area. But she specifically directs them to stay out of the sight of pedestrians because one, Power's horns are pretty noticeable, and two, that would immediately give away that she's a fiend. So because of this, they are traversing through rooftops instead of, on the actual streets. And while while Denji is casually strolling, this is meant to be a calm gig, just a normal patrol, Power is just running all over the place, and one moment she just slaps Denji on the back of the head and basically tells him to provide her with something that she can kill. It is also later revealed that Aki is the reason why Denji and Power got paired together, because he was hoping that this patrol would fail, getting them fired and also hopefully killed. So hey, good try, Aki. But anyways, back to the scene. Power gets a sense of blood and she just darts off. And that's when we see another devil, and this one is called the Sea Cucumber Devil. And even though it's actively being called in, Power jumps from the top of a building, uses her actual abilities, which she's the Blood Fiend, formerly known as the Blood Devil before she turned into a fiend, and creates this massive blood hammer. And she just smashes the Sea Cucumber Devil with one hit. And the episode ends with her laughing like an absolute maniac. And then we see the look on Denji's face and he's just like, what the fuck? Now moving on to episode 3, after Power kills the Sea Cucumber Devil, the cleanup has commenced, and Denji and Power are being reprimanded by Makima. She basically tells them that public safety can't interfere on an assignment that was called in by civilian hunters for them to take care of. And that normally, if this does happen, that public safety hunter would normally be arrested. But since this is a special case, Makima made that go away. She then gets onto them individually. First, Power, by saying that she needs better self-control and that she should stop acting without thinking. And then she moves on to Denji and says that he should be able to control Power. And then Power lies and tells Makima that Denji was the one that told her to do it. And Denji's just like, she lying. I didn't say such a thing. And then Makima tells them both to stop talking. And then we see Power immediately stop. And with this small little gesture, it shows how much control that Makima has even over someone as rowdy as Power. And then afterwards, All Makima says to them is that she just wants to see them work well together, and that's enough to make Power agree with her. But fast forwarding on to a little bit later, we're then at a vending machine with Power and Denji. And as Denji is buying a drink, Power notices a cat and starts petting it. Power then expresses to Denji how much she likes cats more than humans or devils. She even gets personal with him and reveals that she had her own cat named Meowy, but a devil took her. And before she could save Meowy, Makima captured Power. Now, at this point, she doesn't know if whether or not Meowy's alive. And throughout this entire story, Denji isn't fully invested in it, mainly because of the fact that he personally is a dog person and not a cat person. But this is where Power begins to make her intentions clearer to Denji. She wants to save Meowy, and she wants to recruit Denji to help her. Then Power offers him the deal of a lifetime. If he helps rescue Meowy, she'll let him touch her breasts. And immediately upon hearing that, Denji is all for it and he's hyped up and ready to go. And now it's time to go devil hunting. So after the two both get permission to leave and start heading towards the devil's location, on the ride there, Denji mentions that he used to have a pet named Pochita. But now he lives in a world where he can't physically be with Pochita and even pet him anymore because he lives within him now. And by within him, he means obviously his heart. And to that, Power says that humans are foolish and that Pochita is dead. And that the phrase living in your heart is just a form of self-comfort. But Denji meant that in a literal sense, not a metaphorical one, but he decides not to press on this any further. And honestly, at that point, that's when he begins to think maybe we're just made to not get along. We then jump over with Makima, who is talking to the higher-ups and how other countries are beginning to use devils to their advantages. And by advantages, I mean using them within their own things like their military. They then ask about the status of Makima's experimental squad, where Makima is honest and says that they're interesting and they're showing some promise, but in response to that, they just straight up tell her job is to raise and use them and to make sure to not get attached. After the meeting is done, Makima rejoins Aki, who is waiting in the car, and they both drive off. And Aki re-expresses his frustrations with Denji and just straight up just calls him disgusting. And he also brings up the fact that he doesn't understand what Makima sees in this guy. And I honestly like this part a lot. This is when Makima breaks things down with Aki in the form of how she thinks about the situation. She tells him that devils are born with names. The more fear around that thing, the stronger the devil becomes. So for example, a coffee devil would be weak, but a car devil could be strong since people fear things like accidents. And now in Denji's case, she says that he can turn into a chainsaw devil. And that is what's interesting. Now, moving back on with Power and Denji, they have finally made it to their destination and things go downhill fast. So they reach this small, secluded house in what looks like the middle of nowhere, right? And Power just tells Denji, the devil's inside. And Denji brings up the point, they're in an open area and he says, okay, well, I'm a little worried that the devil might see us coming because we're out in the open. And then that's when Power says, oh, I must have misspoke. And then suddenly there is this brief, awkward, looming silence between them. And Power creates a blood hammer just like that. And Denji tries to pull out his axe, but she's quicker and she knocks him out. So Power drags him inside and tries to offer him up to what is revealed to be the Bat Devil. And the Bat Devil grabs Denji, squeezes him like an orange. And as he begins to throw up blood and everything, he is just drinking it. But the Bat Devil says it is disgusting and he throws Denji away. But I guess the good news for him is the fact that despite how good or bad the blood tasted, he was still able to regenerate, because before that moment the Bat Devil was actually injured. But now he basically wants to cleanse his taste palate and look for better tasting human prey. But Power is just like, well, hey, I kept my end of the deal. I gave you a human, whether you liked it or not, I gave it to you. So give me back Meowy. And the Bat Devil is just like, oh, you did, didn't you? I haven't repaid you yet. He goes to grab the cage that has Meowy in it. And before he gives it to Power, he's like, well, actually, I haven't repaid you back for how disgusting that tasted. Basically saying, this is on you. And he lifts up Meowy and the cage that Meowy is in and just gulps it down. And Power is just speechless. She's in disbelief. And Denji is watching all this go down. And Power is utterly defeated at this point. That was her only purpose for doing all of this. And then we get a flashback of how Power meets Meowy. And we see that Meowy back then was a small, starving kitten that Power picked up on a whim to actually fatten her up in order to eat her one day. But in the process of keeping this cat around, she slowly began to actually like the cat's company and also started to actually care for this animal. And she actually says at one point, this is the first time where I let someone or something meet my gaze. Like she truly found comfort in this cat. Anyways, while she and Meowy are sitting on a rooftop, that's when the Bat Devil swoops in, grabs Meowy, and basically holds it hostage and tells Power, bring me a human if you want this cat back. And then going back to the present moment, Power looks over at Denji and she's just like, I now understand how you feel when you lost Pochita. Losing someone you want to pet is horrible. And that's when the Bat Devil grabs Power and swallows her whole too. And to that, the Bat Devil says that Power too tasted bad. And that's when he flies off to the city in hopes to find better tasting blood to, again, clear his palate. But as he's flying off, he doesn't realize immediately that Denji grabbed onto him. And when he does finally notice and look back at Denji, the first thing Denji says, oh my god, I can't remember I'm saying this in the video, but he says, give me my boobs back. Because if you remember, the entire deal was for him to be able to fondle Power's chest if he did this for her. So he's staying focused on the goal at hand, but hey, during this moment, Denji remembers a time where he thought he lost Pochita one day and how worried and just terrified he was that something bigger ate Pochita, only to later find Pochita hiding and crying until Denji found him again. And in that moment, Denji was just full of relief and he just picked up and hugged Pochita. And remembering that moment, that's how Denji is able to better sympathize with Power and overall understanding what her loss feels like in this moment. And that's when Denji pulls his cord and he ends up just shredding through the Bat Devil's arm. The two then crash through a building where Denji tells a woman to run away so then she's not in the middle of the fight. And the Bat Devil is kind of confused and asking why Denji is trying to save humans in this moment, because this is all just such a foreign concept, like a devil helping humans. But anyways, the fight continues. The Bat Devil is throwing cars and everything. It is just, it's just chaos on the streets. But this is a good moment for us to see that Denji is pretty strong, because the car that the Bat Devil threw, Denji catches it and throws it back at him. He almost threw the man that was in the car, but the man is able to get out of the car before he's thrown and the car blows up. So, you know, that's a plus. But overall, we're actually seeing how strong Denji truly is physically, and not just because he has chainsaws for hands and stuff now. And also we see that the chainsaws can retract, which is also pretty cool. But in response to the car blowing up in the Bat Devil's face, the Bat Devil is now just pissed, and he reshapes his mouth and takes in a massive gust of air, and he shoots like this shockwave at Denji, and Denji just goes flying. And the Bat Devil thinks that's enough. And he begins prioritize healing himself by trying to find a human to eat. But Denji is not down for the count. And all that the Bat Devil can hear is basically just the engines of the chainsaw revving. And now Denji is just pissed that he hasn't been able to cop a feel yet. It's so crazy, because the actual the actual scene itself looks badass, but just hearing him say it is just like, oh god, yeah, I forgot this is the actual goal in mind that he has that's actually motivating him to keep going. But anyways, the Bat Devil is now panicking and he throws debris and continues trying to keep Denji away from him, but Denji is deflecting and slicing anything and everything that comes his way. And once he's able to close the distance between him and the Bat Devil, he cuts off the Bat Devil's arm and then finishes him by basically splitting him open, and his guts goes everywhere. And that's how the Bat Devil dies. And then moving on to episode 4 is when we actually see more of Power and Meowy's bond growing stronger. And, throughout their adventures together, we're actually seeing a softer side of Power. We see Power in this kind of desperate and troubled state where she's trying to understand why she's doing all of this for a lesser creature, especially given the fact that Power has only known killing. She has never felt this way about anything living before, but even so, this brings her to the realization of what more she finds of blood, because since she is the blood devil, she has always loved blood. But ever since Meowy came into her life, she learned something else about blood, and that's that blood is warm. And not only that, but blood feels pleasant. And then with that realization, Power wakes up and she's in the stomach of the Bat Devil, and Meowy still in the cage sitting right by her side. And then fast forwarding a little bit more, we see that Denji has successfully defeated the Bat Devil, but one track mind Denji, there is one thing that he wants his end of the deal on, and of course we all know what that is. And of course Power is just like, this is such a foolish reason, but all right, have at it. And actually getting that the go ahead from Power, Denji pulls up his arm. He shoots his arm up in celebration, and the moment he does it, his arm gets shot off. Well, his hand gets shot off. And then we are introduced to the next devil that we have to take down. Literally no breaks in this show. So this time we are going against the Leech Devil. He pulls his cord on his chest and he begins to transform, but there's a problem. Denji cannot transform all the way. He's having some performance issues. So the problem is Denji has lost way too much blood, and this is causing him to not be able to fully bring out his chainsaw. So there's just a very tiny chainsaw coming out of his forehead, and then that's it. And the Leech Devil is revealed to be the girlfriend of the Bat Devil, known as Batty. So now the Leech Devil's kind of pissed, and she's just like, you killed my man, but you know what, you look kind of good, so maybe I'll let that slide if you be mine. And Denji, of course, is just like, okay, well, what would happen to these two? And the Leech Devil looks over at them and she's just like, they die. And upon hearing that, Denji's just like, no, sorry, that don't work for me. And the next fight ensues. And you know what? Whether or not it's to just claim his prize, the whole grab thing, he stands his ground and takes on the devil by himself. Denji does actually have a little bit of trouble with the Leech Devil, especially just finishing a major fight and going into his next major fight immediately after. So he is having some problems, but he does get a lot of hits off, but she does too, man. And there's one point in the fight where his eye is popping out of the socket. Like he's growing through it. And throughout this fight, Denji is just getting more and more frustrated. And he says, I'm not going to stop until I'm able to cop a feel. And obviously, again, from the outside looking in, this sounds kind of ridiculous. And the Leech Devil, calls him out on it and calls his dream, like a trashy dream. And this just sets Denji off, because now it's not just Aki calling out his dream, and it's not just Power, but it's also a devil too. So you have all these people shitting on the one thing that you believe that you want and that you believe is worth it to you, only for others to laugh at it. And then he just straight up tells the Leech Devil, well, let's just have a dream battle. And if I win, that means your dream was weaker than my dream of touching a tit, basically. And he just bomb rushes towards the Leech Devil. He grabs the intestines on the ground, tries to wrap it up around her. So then, she loses her balance and everything. Tries to use anything to its advantage in order to get the upper hand. But the thing is, the Leech Devil is not going down without a fight. And at the climax of the fight, the moment that he actually dives off and tries to headbutt her with his chainsaw, he actually gets caught, impaled by the Leech Devil's tongue. And at this point, Denji is just like utterly defeated. But then, Aki comes in and saves the day. And wow, this was one of my favorite entrances, and reveals that devil hunters can also work alongside devils via devil contracts, but we'll get to that detail in a second. But Anyways, alongside Aki are a couple of new characters. We'll get into their names later, but I think the only one that we are formally introduced to first is Aki Sr., whose name is Himino. That's the girl with the eye patch. But anyways, afterwards, Denji wakes up in the hospital. And Aki gives him the rundown of everything that happened. And Aki is then asked about the devil that he summoned, and he's actually pretty transparent about this, and he reveals that devil hunters are able to contract devils, and that specific devil was known as the fox devil. Now, as for how devil contracts works, well, devil contracts work in a way of give and take. So in exchange for a devil's cooperation, the devil normally asks for something. So in this particular instance, what the fox devil asked from Aki is some skin from his arm. And now is a good time to actually bring up what happened in episode 1 when it came to deal with Pochita. This is not the same thing as a devil contract. There was no give and take in terms of anything transactional going on between Pochita. That is, I would like to consider that a gesture made out of love that was initiated from Pochita instead of trying to get something out of Denji. So to be clear, what Denji and Pochita did in episode 1 is not considered a devil contract. What Aki did with the fox devil is. And there will be other examples later on when it comes to other devil hunters, but we'll save that for later. But anyways, they end their conversation with Denji actually telling Aki that, he might think his dream is trashy, but at the end of the day, he can count on him, and that he knows what he wants to do, and he plans on fulfilling that duty as a public safety devil hunter. Now, fast forwarding a good bit, we have Aki meeting with Makima, and honestly, Aki actually covers for us a little bit. He doesn't fully throw us under the bus, and Makima even notices this, and she's just like, hey, you seem a little bit more flexible now, don't you? Because Aki is giving Denji credit where credit is due. He is the one that defeated the Bat Devil, and in terms of the Leech Devil attacked him first. All these other things to make sure that it's clear that Denji didn't initiate any of these things, and that Division 4 did what they needed to do and exterminated the devils that needed to be exterminated because they were causing massive damage around the town. But anyways, then fast forwarding to the next morning, we get probably one of my favorite montages of this series, and that's just a very nice slice of life point of view from Aki. And it's just so relaxing because it shows how routine this guy is. He wakes up, he brushes his teeth, he makes his coffee, goes outside and reads the morning paper. It's just like, it feels like such a mundane thing to do, but it's so relatable. You know what I mean? Anyways, as he and Denji are now sitting in the kitchen, there is a disturbance at the front door. And this is when things get a little rowdy. Now, the banging at the door is not stopping. And Denji and Aki are both just like, what is going on? And then the knob of the door is busted out by Powder using her blood hammer. And Aki immediately calls Makima, and he's just like, what the fuck is going on? Why this girl at my house? And Makima is just like, oh yeah, so now I want you to not only look after Denji, but I also want you to monitor and look after Power too. At first, obviously, Aki is just like, shit, man, I don't want to do this. But it's Makima. She, gives him some lip service, and then Aki agrees. And it's not a very easy transition. And funnily enough, both Denji and Aki are on the same page of how disgusting and annoying Power is. She throws her vegetables. She doesn't flush the toilet. She tries her best not to shower. She has to literally be told to do these things. It's so funny, Denji being on the side of Aki in terms of being civilized and, courteous. But fast forwarding to the end of the episode, we get Denji scrubbing the toilet until Power comes in, and she actually has to remind Denji of this. But she does the little, that motion to remind him that, like, hey, we still had a deal, remember? And it takes Denji a second, but then he's like, oh my God, I forgot, And one of my favorite ways to end this episode, or maybe I should say one of my favorite ways that Denji could have ended the episode, he looks at this fiend and he says, she's an angel. Obviously playing off the idea of, someone who was formerly a devil, now a fiend, is, an angel, ha ha ha. But anyways, moving on to episode 5. So continuing on with episode 5, we see that Power does end up keeping her promise and allows Denji 3 squeezes. And obviously Denji is extremely excited, and on the 3rd squeeze, a pad falls out. And that's when Denji realizes that she is wearing stuffing, and Power is completely, obviously she's unbothered by the entire thing. And Denji feels kind of empty and almost unmotivated now, because he's realizing, at least in this moment, that his dream, this goal that he worked himself up to, is not what he expected. So the next day, Denji is just completely out of it. He's not really focused or anything. Not even in the presence of Makima, he's not in the zone. And Makima immediately notices this, and she calls him out on it, and she asks, what's bothering you? And Denji's honest, and he says that he got to do what he always wanted to be able to do, but in that moment, it didn't feel great. And now this is making him wonder if the future he thinks he wants actually happens, if this is going to feel the exact same as he's feeling right now. And this is where Makima takes the initiative and pushes more to know what Denji is talking about. And this is when he's transparent. He says he was able to touch a boob for the first time, and that even though this was something that he was looking forward to, it didn't feel as good as he thought it would for him. And then this is when Makima gets like a little, well, you'll see. So anyways, this is where Makima closes the distance between the two of them, and then this is where things get a little it gets a little spicy. She tells Denji that when it comes to sex, the better something feels when you get to know the person. She then grabs his hands and starts playing between his fingers, and she begins to express some of the sensations that you feel when you are with a person. Are their hands warm or cold? What's the shape of their ears? And she then goes as far as to take Denji's finger and lightly bite it. And she's just like, remember this feeling, like she is very good at this whole seduction, control over others. But Makima goes on to say that, even if he can't see her, just by how hard she bit him, he would know in the future that it was her. Like things like that, to show that you really are able to know people just by feeling, just by touch. After all of that, that's when she grabs Denji's hand and puts it on her chest. And then this is when Denji actually does freak out. And I think this is what he imagined what it would feel like the first time he touched someone's chest. Honestly, this might be well beyond that point, beyond his imagination. And she then basically gets on top of Denji, and she squats down, so she's right over Denji. She gets it real close, and then that's when she gets to actually talk about what she wants to talk about with Denji. And she says, will you do something for me? So here we go, thinking that Denji might be about to get a kiss or something. No, not with Makima. There's always something. Obviously, Denji says yes. And this is where we get the big task, and that is taking down the Gun Devil. She explains how the Gun Devil first appeared 13 years ago in America. At this point in time, the Gun Devil's location is unknown, and they have been trying to locate the Gun Devil all this time. And what she wants Denji to do, once they are able to track down its exact location, she wants Denji to find it and kill it. Which is a tall order, but we're going to figure out how big of an order this really is in a second. But obviously, for a big task like this, there has to be a reward involved. And Denji's reward is he's able to do anything with and or to Makima. And when he hears anything, Denji is kind of just like, anything? And Makima's just like, yeah, anything. And that's when Denji actually locks in. He's like, all right, let's do it. But this is where we also get more information on the Gun Devil itself. So basically, she starts off with the origin of the Gun Devil, and that was when more people started using guns against devils. But in doing so, that caused a whole lot more problems, and this led up to more people actually being afraid of guns. Then it got to a point where there was just this massive terrorist attack in America. And obviously, in America, we have just an abundance of firearms here. But in that moment, that's when the gun devil officially appeared. And then that's when we go back in time to that moment. And this is in a flashback from Aki's past. And I think this was such a crazy flashback. So basically, we see Aki with his family, and he and his younger brother, who is known to get sick very easily, he goes outside with Aki and they play in the snow for a little bit. And, they're throwing snowballs at one another. And originally, Aki is he doesn't want to play. He finds the actual thing to be irritating. And as he begins to warm up to his brother, and, they're actually both having fun now, he tells his brother to go back inside and to get some gloves so then he doesn't get sick. And the moment that his brother turns around, waves at him, and heads inside the house, his entire house gets obliterated. Just nothing left. And that is actually where it's revealed by Makima voicing over everything. That is the gun devil just moving. And during that incident, not only did it take out all of Aki's family, but it killed 1.2 million people in 5 minutes. And after that moment, the gun devil was just never seen again. No one could track this thing down. But of course, people's fear of, firearms and stuff still very much existed. So the gun devil is just actively getting stronger and thriving. But this did cause for, gun laws to actually be enacted to try to get ahead of these things. But honestly, how much is that really going to work, Because none of them are really sure how strong the gun devil truly is in present day, because none of them have been able to either A, find the gun devil, and B, test out the gun devil's strength firsthand. But anyways, we get to how they can track down the gun devil. And this is where Makima brings up the fact that the gun devil moves so fast that pieces of its flesh rips off of it. Some of it is eaten by other devils, and that just makes the other devils stronger. Just eating a piece of the gun devil's flesh is what makes other devils stronger. That is absolutely insane. But they have been collecting these pieces of the gun devil's flesh, and what's actually happening when they do this is it creates this sort of magnetic force. And the goal is to collect as many pieces of the flesh as possible and pretty much use that as a compass in order to find the location of the gun devil. And then we actually move forward to see Aki, who has just taken down a fish devil. I don't have notes in front of me. I'm just doing this by memory, so hopefully it's actually named the fish devil. But in that fish devil is a piece of the gun devil's flesh. And obviously we're going to add that to the collection. And that's where it's revealed in real time to the audience, if we haven't caught on yet who the little boy was in the flashback, that little boy was indeed Aki. But anyways, our next mission is going to be at a hotel called Hotel Morin, and we're bringing everybody. So in this little group, we have Denji, Power, Himeno, and then 2 public safety devil hunters known as Arai and Kobani. Aki lets everybody know that the devil that they're after in this hotel has likely eaten one of the gun devil's flesh, because the piece of flesh that Aki keeps around is reacting to whatever devil is inside of the hotel. And before we go inside, Himeno is such a wonderful person. To better motivate Denji, she gives Denji a deal. And that deal is that if he kills the devil that is inside the hotel, then she will give Denji a kiss with tongue. And that, of course, is enough to motivate Denji, and here we go. Now, as they're all walking through the hallway, Himeno and Aki are a little bit back, and they're talking about the newbies. And Aki is wondering if these newbies are going to be any good. And Himeno actually says that though they're not strong, they do show promise. So that's something. For example, with Kobani, she says that she's not brave, but she is pretty strong. And in terms of Arai, she says that he does have motivation, but he isn't strong yet. So, like, there are some things that everyone can work on, but overall, she does think that they do have a decent group and a decent shot. But now, in terms of how she feels about Aki, it's clear that she's more worried about him than the others. I think that's more based off of the bond that they were able to grow over time. And she tells Aki not to die on her. And then this is when we get our first flashback about Himeno. And we are in a graveyard with her master named Kishibe. And Kishibe is introducing Aki and Himeno for the first time. And it's pretty depressing because she's visiting the grave of her last partner, and she's straight up with Aki, and she tells him, "You are my sixth partner. The others are gone. They died." And like how she did in present day, she tells him again, "Don't die on me, Aki." But anyways, back in present day, they made it to the end of the hallway where they begin to sense the presence of another devil. And this is when a very freaky little devil walks out of one of the rooms, and it's just a head with a foot and a hand protruding out of each side. And it leaps towards Kobani, and before it can get at her, the devil is stopped mid-air in its tracks by Himeno's devil contract. And as the devil is stuck in place, power just slashes the devil in half. This is where Himeno reveals that her devil contract is with the ghost devil. And in exchange for using its power, she had to give up her right eye, which obviously explains the eye patch. So this is another example of these devil contracts varying very drastically depending on what they want in exchange for you using just a piece of their power. But anyways, as they continue through the hotel, something very strange happens. And that's the fact that they were currently on the 8th floor while they were attacked by the one little devil. And what our eye noticed was after they took down the first devil, they passed the same blood spatter that was on the wall and on the floor. So he goes back and checks the floor that they were on, and he just straight up asks Aki, and he's just like, "We were on the 8th floor going up to the 9th, correct?" And Aki says, "Yeah, we were." And then he's just like, "Something isn't right." So then he runs down the stairs to see exactly what's going on, and then he appears upstairs to the floor that they're meant to be going to. And everybody is just bewildered. They're just like, what just happened? And the episode ends with Kobani just freaking out. So anyways, moving on to episode 6, things get a little trippy. To test the floor's constant loop, Himeno tells Kobani to lift up 2 peace signs as she runs down the stairs and sees if it's the same positioning as she goes down the steps. And lo and behold, she appears on what would be the 9th floor above them, showing that this is indeed a full loop of the 8th floor no matter where you go. And not only that, but this isn't an illusion of some sort. Then Aki decides to enter in one of the rooms to see if he's able to find an exit through a nearby window. But the issue is that window leads to another room across the hall. So even the windows don't lead to the outside. And when he reappears, he's directly across from where he first started. So this just confirms that all exits on the 8th floor are closed off, and no matter what you do, you are stuck on this floor. Now it's time to figure out how to get off the 8th floor. Denji, of course, immediately blames power for killing the devil and getting them stuck on this infinite loop on the 8th floor. But Aki explains to Denji that if that were the devil that was doing this, then that devil's abilities would cease, because when a devil dies, its power dies along with it. So that means that the devil that power killed wasn't the cause. And this makes it for the first time that they've seen a devil manipulate space like this before. And this makes Himeno worry that rescue teams won't be able to get to them since they're trapped, and that if they did try to rescue them, that they could also get trapped as well. And upon this realization or possibility, Kobeni freaks out and she basically tells them that, oh my god, we're all gonna die. And then we get a little bit of background on her, and she reveals that she didn't want to do any of this in the first place. Her family forced her to become a devil hunter. Either that or a sex worker. So, weighing her options, this would have been the preferred choice for her. And Power, she just laughs at it, and it's... We know how Power is, so whatever. But anyways, after a while, Aki realizes that all the clocks have frozen at 8:18, and he's able to deduce that the devil that they're dealing with is able to manipulate time, or perhaps just stop time on this specific floor. And despite the circumstances, Denji actually turns this into a positive and says that, you know, this is a good thing because this means that he's able to sleep forever. And to that, Arai calls him an idiot, and Denji just says, wake me up when you figure it out. And then he just goes to sleep. And as for the status of Aki, he is just hard set on getting out of here as soon as possible. So he has refused to eat or anything until he has been able to find the devil that is keeping them here. And as for his backup, that was supposed to be Arai, but Arai, putting it bluntly, he is just too scared to do anything, and he's basically just hiding in a room. As for Kobeni, she's losing her mind. She tries to drink out of a toilet at one point. It's just a mess, and Himeno actually has to end up knocking her out so then she can relax. And as for Power, she's in her own little world, and she proclaims that she's going to win a Nobel Prize and that she's going to become prime minister and all this kind of stuff and raise taxes up 100% to, you know, see the humans lose their minds. It's just, she's just trying to find ways to cause chaos, basically. And now even Himeno is just sitting around and she lights her last cigarette. And Denji notices that she uses the same brand that Aki does, and she reveals that she's the one that taught Aki how to smoke. And this is when we enter a flashback where Himeno asks Aki for the first time if he smokes, and Aki says no, he doesn't. And he also says that smoking is bad for your health, which it is. But in response to that, she says, you know, at the end of the day, it all doesn't really matter just because of the fact that hunters die young anyway. Especially since their ultimate mission is to go after the gun devil. In her mind, this is kind of a YOLO type of thing. And so if they're all going to die young anyway, what's the point in, you know, looking after your health and sparing yourself a cigarette or two? You know what I mean? And then in response to that, Aki says that he won't die so easily. And then moving on to another flashback where we see a grieving woman that ends up slapping Himeno. And she blames Himeno for her partner's death. And Aki sticks gum in the woman's hair and tells Himeno to fight back next time. And the two just laugh it off. So we're actually seeing, you know, how they were able to warm up to one another despite having very differing personalities. And then later on, when the two are sitting in like a little restaurant, Himeno offers Aki a cigarette. And she is basically telling him, you know, hey, we're teammates, so at the very least, you should smoke with me. And Aki says, only one. Now back in the present, Aki asks if Himeno has another cigarette. And she says that she's smoking the last one. He ends up taking it from her anyway. And Denji jokes around and says that they, you know, indirectly kissed because both their lips shared the same cigarette. Both of them ignore what Denji says, and Aki gets to the point and says that there's bad news and that the devil is growing. They then hear a noise and they run into a hallway, and what we end up seeing, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like this gigantic ball of flesh with eyes and a whole lot of arms and stuff. It's blocking their way out. And what the devil ends up doing is trying to make a deal with them. And the deal is, let me eat Denji, and I'll let the rest of you go free. And then Kobeni's bitch ass, she's losing her mind, so I get it, but she pulls out a knife immediately, and she screams at Denji to let the devil eat him. And then this girl just rushes at Denji. But before she can get to him, Aki's the one that disarms her, and Himeno knocks her out again for the second time this episode. Now try to find more solutions. Aki tries to summon the fox devil, but the fox devil doesn't come out. and he realizes that they are completely sealed off from the outside world. I don't know if I mentioned this or not yet, but the demon is called the Eternity Devil, I believe. Now, next, what Himeno does is she tries to use the Ghost Devil arm and ends up grabbing parts of the Eternity Devil. And the devil responds by getting bigger. And he tells them that what they're attacking isn't the real body, it's only just its stomach. But in regards to its heart, that's somewhere else. And he brings up the deal one more time, trying to barter with them, trying to get Denji, being like, all right, if you let me eat Denji, I will set y'all free. This time, Arai is the one that proposes that they let the Eternity Devil eat Denji. But Aki refuses and says that the reason why they don't want to do this is because they are playing into the devil's hands, because the devil wants Denji. That must be because Denji is dangerous to the devil. And to that, Himeno agrees. Power, on the other hand, is fine with killing Denji, and she just wants to leave with her Nobel Prize and all the stuff that she's been thinking of in that little hotel room. But Aki reminds them that fiends can't make contracts. That would mean that the devil wouldn't have to keep its word if he tried to make a deal with power. Now, as more time passes, everyone is getting impatient at this point. They're out of food and everything. Kobani is losing her mind, literally. She goes from blaming power to claiming that Arai is a spy. She even rushes him with a knife and I know what you are. She is just losing it. And then Power plays into this, trying to rile her up and really get her going to get her to kill Arai. But then suddenly the entire floor flips like 90 degrees. So now the devil is expanding its effect range, and he's getting even more frustrated. He's like, I will only kill Chainsaw. Just give me Chainsaw. But again, Aki doesn't want to do that, and neither does Himeno. And at this point, Aki doesn't really see much else to do. So what he ends up doing is he begins to pull out his sword, but Himeno stops him. And then it's revealed to us that if he uses that sword, it will shorten his lifespan. And when it comes to that, she would rather kill Denji than let Aki consciously make the decision to shorten his own life. She's not playing around when it comes to her partner. Then, for another time, Kobani tries to stab Denji, but Aki gets in the way and gets stabbed himself. Now, as for the reason why, Aki is just like, you know what, I do not care. All I recognize is that Denji and I have the same goal, and that's to kill the Gun Devil, and we have our best shot if Denji is still alive and with us to help us with this. He admits he can't do that alone. He cannot take the Gun Devil alone. But now we get to Denji's decision, and he's even more annoyed now because Aki just threw himself in front of a knife in order to save him. He then tells Power to try to stop Aki's bleeding, and Power tells Denji that she can only control her own blood, but if Aki dies, she loses her cook. So let's try to keep Aki alive. Himeno starts panicking. Kobani says that Denji's at fault for not letting the devil eat him. And then Denji's just over it. He says, I'm going to fight it from the inside. And that's what he does. But before he leaves, he reminds Himeno, he says, don't forget about that kiss once we get out of here though. If I make it out alive, I want that kiss. And he also recognizes and tells them that, hey, the demon must be afraid of me because it specifically wants me dead. That's when he pulls his cord and he jumps into the Eternity Devil's little mouth thing and he gets to work. And that's the end of episode 6. So moving on to episode 7, Denji continues his battle against the Eternity Devil, but we have a problem. So Denji's chainsaws keep retracting due to his blood loss. But the quick thinking Denji here, he has the idea, you know what? I'll just start drinking the Eternity Devil's blood. Why, you might ask? So he can regenerate that way. And obviously doing this actually hurts the Eternity Devil, and he begins to just scream in pain. And while the Eternity Devil is just screaming, Denji is just laughing. And he just keeps attacking nonstop, knowing, hey, it's working. And this makes me into just this killing machine. Because for all the blood that I'm losing, all I have to do is just keep taking in the blood that I'm getting from you. And I can just keep this up all day long. And that's what Denji does. And Himeno is just watching, and this actually triggers a conversation that she remembers having with her mentor Kishibe. And what she remembers is when he told her that the hunters devils fear most are the ones that are insane. And in regards to sane hunters, they're the ones that die early. But seeing Denji laugh as he's actively tearing this devil apart, Himeno is actually finally finding hope in Denji because she's realizing that Denji is one of the crazy ones, you know? Because in this line of business, the crazy ones are the ones who survive. And then fast forwarding a little bit, we do get a flashback of Himeno begging Aki to quit public safety and to instead do something safer like becoming a civilian hunter. But Aki just outright refuses that because his overall goal is to get to the gun devil, and he cannot do that being a civilian hunter. But back in the present day, Denji is still doing his thing, slashing and hacking away at the Eternity Devil. And I think Denji basically classifies himself as this perpetual motion machine or something like that. God, I really should put up these episodes where I'm talking like this for this long, but fact check me if I'm wrong. But anyways, Denji ends up fighting the Eternity Devil for like 3 days, y'all. Like non-stop 3 days straight. Just because he keeps cutting and drinking the blood and then healing and then repeating. So cut, drink blood, heal, repeat. Cut, drink blood, heal, repeat. It just constantly until the Eternity Devil just can't take it anymore and he just kills himself. Well, I guess to be more literal here, he begs Denji to end it and shows Denji where his heart is. But it's the same result. And of course, after the battle, Denji is finally worn out. He's exhausted and he collapses from exhaustion. But Himeno catches him. And this is where she realizes that Denji actually fell asleep mid-fight. So basically, in a way, you could think of him as just on autopilot throughout the entire thing, which is understandable. Again, it's been 3 days of him just constantly hacking away at the Eternity Devil, so I get it. So afterwards, where does everybody decide to go? Well, Himeno takes it upon herself to invite everybody to what they call like a newcomer like welcome party. And this is to hopefully boost everyone's morale and to stop Kobeni from obviously quitting. Well, Kobeni and Arai from quitting. And as for Aki, he wants to invite Makima to the newcomer party as well. And after hearing this, Himeno does end up having some pretty important key questions. And those are, one is, what exactly is Denji in the first place? What all does Makima know about Denji, and why is she so interested in him? And to that, Aki admits that he wants to know all those things too. But anyway, it is now time for the newcomer welcome party, and we finally get to know the entire group. We get to know everyone's ages. So the first thing we learn is that Denji is 16 years old, Arai is 22, and he's contracted with the Fox Devil. And Kobeni is 20, and her contracted devil is a secret because she wants to keep it that way. And once Denji hears that Arai also has a contract with the Fox Devil, he brings up the fact that Aki does as well. And Aki explains to Denji that multiple devil hunters actually do have a contract with the Fox Devil, and the Fox Devil is pretty friendly to devil hunters. But in terms of what all those devil hunters can use, apparently it's pretty rare for the devil hunters being able to use the head of the Fox Devil. And what Himeno ends up saying, I believe, is that only the attractive hunters are allowed to use its head. So use that information as you will when it comes to Aki being able to utilize the Fox Devil's head. But anyways, Denji, he is waiting for her kiss. If you remember the little bet that they had earlier on, it's still very much in play. It's revealed that Himeno kisses everybody basically, and it's not anything really special, but Denji doesn't really care. All he cares about is that he gets a kiss with tongue as promised. But before we can get this kiss, we do have a late arrival to the newcomer party, and that is Makima herself. She did actually end up coming, and unfortunately it's before Denji's able to get his kiss, so now it's a little bit more awkward. But Makima walks in and the mood immediately shifts. Denji panics because he's like, oh no, I'm gonna have to kiss Himeno in front of the woman that I actually do want to be with. But Makima ends up sitting beside Aki, and Aki tells her that they were able to get another Gun Devil piece. And then Makima asks if anyone has targeted Denji, and Aki says yes. And the follow-up question that he has for her is if Makima knows something. And Makima, being Makima, is elusive to the question, and she says, I will tell you if you can outdrink me. Now, the problem is everyone's already been drinking, but Himeno joins the challenge, Aki joins the challenge because they both want to know. And hopefully, out of the two of them, maybe, just maybe, one of them can actually beat Makima. But alas, no one beats Makima, and the worst part about all this is that Himeno is just more drunk than she already was prior to the drinking contest. And it's time for Denji's kiss. And this is where things get very gross. So if you're squeamish, skip ahead, please God. I don't even want to cover this part. But anyways, it's time for the kiss. And Himeno leans in and she just goes straight at it without pretty much any warning at all. And she kisses him. And at first, Denji is thrilled. So Himeno, she vomits in Denji's mouth. And Denji is just so confused at first because he's like, well, one, this is a sensation that he's never felt before. So originally he was really thrilled because like, oh my God, this feels great. This feels warm. And then he's like, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right. And that's when he realizes, oh my God. And everybody is just like freaking out. Kobeni nearly throws up herself. It's like the entire thing is just disgusting. I'm skipping, going forward. Oh my God. Anyways, the aftermath, Denji's in the bathroom and Arai is actually the one comforting him throughout this very, very traumatic experience. And Arai is just jealous of Denji's talent. Just thinking back on everything that Denji was able to do against the Eternity Devil and stuff like that. But moving forward, Denji is just toppled over still, and he's just like, my first kiss tasted like puke. Don't envy me right now, you know? And to that, Arai laughs it off. And after the party, everybody is gathered outside getting ready to leave. And Makima asks where Denji is. And that's where she's told that Himeno has taken Denji back to her place. So back at Himeno's apartment, she lays Denji on her futon. And Denji wakes up wanting... And he just wants water at this point. His mouth is just dried out from vomiting in the toilet. But Himeno decides to, well, I think it was beer. She drank some beer, I believe. And then she like bird feeds it into Denji's mouth. And she then just plops down next to him. And she says to him, she brings up Makima. And more specifically, she brings up the fact that both he and Aki both like the same woman, which is Makima. And this annoys Himeno because she's just like, I don't see what y'all see in her. But fast forwarding, there is a little bit of awkward silence between the two of them. And Himeno is just laying next to Denji. And then she pops the question, do you want to do it? And that's how the episode ends. Now, moving on to episode 8, we get a bit of a replay of how things went down to Himeno carrying unconscious Denji through her apartment and plopping him down on the bed and everything like that. And they're like completely different perspective shots and stuff like that. So it was pretty interesting. But fast forwarding to the do you want to do it question, Denji actually appears to be down and she is able to take his shirt off and all that stuff. And as she is taking off Denji's pants, she finds a lollipop in his pants pocket. And then we get a flashback to the bar where Makima is actually consoling Denji after that horrid experience. And she actually ends up giving him that cola flavored lollipop. Denji is obviously still distraught and he's let down by the entire experience. And Makima tells him, that I doubt that you'll ever forget the taste and the memory of your first kiss tasting like vomit. But, maybe this will make him feel better. And she first tastes the lollipop herself and then hands it over to Denji and puts it in his mouth to hopefully have him think of another taste instead of just that puke flavored kiss. But anyways, moving forward with that night with Denji and Himeno, it's revealed that they don't actually have sex, which is great. Now, fast forwarding to the next morning, Denji and Himeno are sitting on a balcony. She reveals to Denji that she has feelings for Aki. Denji's just like, what the fuck? Why? And all she says is, I like his face. And you know what? All power to you. I respect it. But afterwards, Himeno proposes that the two of them team up. And she says, I will help you get Makima if you help me get Aki. And to that, of course, Denji agrees. Just no time wasted there. And then with that, the alliance is formed and Himeno promises that out of this, he will get a real kiss that's even better than last night. And fully take in this very lighthearted moment because things are about to get nuts. We then move on to Makima on a train and she's on her way to Kyoto to meet with the higher-ups. And she's sitting calmly next to one of her colleagues reminiscing on the following night and, how much fun she had and that she actually really did enjoy that moment. And then we get this eerie shot where 4 passengers, 2 behind Makima, and 2 in front of Makima all duck down their heads at the exact same time. And all you hear is this very soft shuffling through bags and opening of zippers and stuff like that. And then seconds later, gunfire. Makima and her colleague are shot in the back of the head. And then they're shot multiple times again from the front. And this is where all hell breaks loose. Now, at the same time, the rest of Division 4 is having the same problem, and no one is shown safe. Not even Kobani and Arai are safe after they assist with helping an elderly woman. And as even they turn their backs towards her, she pulls out a gun and she opens fire. And it's not just those 2, it's all of Division 4. All of them are actively being gunned down by what appears to be just regular civilians, just random civilians. And that just shows that this is a wide, coordinated attack specifically aimed at Division 4. And now moving on to a restaurant that Denji, Aki, Himeno, and Power are at. They hear some bangs, but they don't know what it is. In Japan, it's very hard to get firearms. So it's not the first thing that they think about is happening is, oh, there's a shooting going on. So they chalk it up to, maybe there's like a festival in town, something, something to warrant the bangs that they heard for just a brief amount of time. But anyways, as they're all eating, there is a mysterious man sitting at the table over next to them. And this is revealed to be the grandson of the Yakuza boss that Denji was indebted to. And Denji realizes this immediately once the man pulls up a picture. And then once he makes known what the Yakuza boss meant to him personally, again, that being his grandfather, he pulls out his firearm and shoots everybody at that table. First, he shoots Denji in the head. Aki next, then he shoots Himeno. Then he tries to shoot Power, but he misses. And afterwards, Power, she gets a punch in, then she calls for Aki, and Aki summons the Fox Devil. And as the Fox Devil tries to eat the man, the Fox Devil is just like, you put something horrid in my mouth. And out bursts the real problem here. And he's revealed to be Katana Man. So at this point, the restaurant is just obliterated because of Aki summoning the fox devil inside. And seeing no other choice, he decides he has to use the cursed sword that shortens his lifespan. So he takes on the Katana Man, and with each strike, it reduces his life. But ultimately, he does pierce the man 3 times with it, and then he summons the Cursed Devil. And the Cursed Devil appears behind Katana Man, and he gets crucified. And now we see him in this bloodied pool, basically, and they think it's over, but in terms of the damage, Himeno is severely injured because she got shot in the chest. Power says they need to get her to a doctor now. And before they can even move, we have another visitor, and this time it's a girl in a hoodie. And this girl is able to call out, "Oh, that's the Cursed Devil, huh?" I think her name is Sawatari or Akane Sawatari. It's something like that. And she walks over to Katana Man, places a hand on him, and is able to revive him. And all she says is, "Get up." And she's like, "Do you know why you lost?" And he's just like, "Yeah, I underestimated him real bad." But yeah, Katana Man is back alive, back in action, and Aki is just horrified. He's just like, "Oh my God, what are we dealing with today?" And she tells him, "This time, kill his ass." And then Katana Man, he gets in this position, and then in like a blink of an eye, he appears behind Aki, and it takes a couple seconds for Aki to realize, oh, something's wrong. And Aki's torso just gets slashed. And at this point, when I watched this for the first time, I thought Aki was a goner. I thought that was it. Himeno is over there, telling Power, "Hey, help Aki. Don't worry about me." And Power is honest, and she's like, "I can't even follow this guy's movements." And then Himeno is now desperate, and she tells the Ghost Devil, "Help him." And the Ghost Devil is just like, "Absolutely not. That girl, she is dreadful." And Himeno's just like, "You know what? Fine. I will give you everything I have if you save Aki." And the Ghost Devil is like, "Okay." And this is when the Ghost Devil attacks Katana Man. And she actually puts up a great fight against Katana Man. And Katana Man would have died if it weren't for Akane. And we cut back over to Himeno, and we see her just slowly disappearing. First, one arm disappears. Then the next arm disappears. And through this entire moment, she's speaking internally to herself, being like, Aki can cry, and she's never been able to see someone like Aki still being able to express these emotions so openly. And with this, she's hoping that at the end of it all, Aki is able to live. So once this is all over, he can cry for her when she dies. And this part, I ain't gonna lie, this part, like, it got me. Anyways, Saratari now summons her snake devil, and she just says a single command. I think it was just like eat or something like that. And the snake devil just chomps down and eats the ghost devil. Then with a simple command, she just says leave. And then the snake devil just disappears. And now with nothing left because the ghost devil is gone and Himeno just gave everything to stop this guy. And it just resulted in the ghost devil just being eaten by the snake devil. He looks over at where Himeno was, and all you see is just her clothes and her eye patch. That's all that's left of her. And that's how the episode ends. And that brings us to episode 9, where we kick off the episode with the ghost devil being able to pull the cord for Denji's chainsaw for him to transform. And the fight between Katana Man and Chainsaw Man is officially underway. Now, this fight is actually interesting because this is the first time that Denji is fighting someone, well, like who's a hybrid like he is. The issue is Denji doesn't know exactly what's going on still, but at this point, he doesn't care. He sees them as bad guys, and that's all that he needs to know. He launches himself at Katana Man, and the fight begins in haste. Denji ends up grabbing one of Katana Man's guys and uses him as a hostage, being like, all right, calm down. Don't make me do this. You know, that whole type of thing. And Katana Man's just like, what's this going to do? Is it supposed to stop me? You know, that kind of thing. And he just completely ignores the whole human shield hostage situation. And he slices through his own guy and Denji. And he ends up just picking up Denji by the handle, on his head, and proceeds on with trying to take him away. Now, as for where Power is, it's revealed that Power was able to get away. And in terms of Aki is just defeated, understandably. Especially with Himeno gone, it just feels like everybody is out of action. But is everybody out of action? This is when we cut back to the train. And the squad that was responsible for disposing of Makima, they get a little surprised. So as they're huddled up talking a couple feet away from where Makima's body was, one of the guys turns around and he sees a bloodied Makima just smiling, that casual smile, and they all reach for their guns, whip it up really fast, and that's when the screen just cuts to black. And I think we all know that things aren't about to end well for them. Anyways, we cut to outside of the train where we see two more public safety devil hunters, right? Their names are Kurose and Tendo. And once that train comes to a stop, people flood out of that train running for their lives, and then they see bloodied up Makima. And Makima is just like, they're so confused, and they're just like, Makima, what happened? And Makima reveals, okay, there was a shooting on the train, and first off, that little lunch meeting that we had, that's canceled, but we need to get to work. So what we're going to do is y'all are going to round me up, she said, like 30 convicts that have death sentences or worse, and bring them to me, to a temple, basically. So they do as she says and bring her these 30 death row inmates. And what ends up happening is she lines them all up, blindfolds them, and what she ends up doing is using each one to take down each person individually. So every death row inmate is going to have to basically say a name. And whoever's name that they say is going to be linked to whoever Makima wants to be her target. And each person that they say, she presses her hands together and twists. And we see one by one, these people just get wrung to death. Or to better describe it, they pop like balloons. And it's just gruesome. Every single one is just crushed to death. And this is the first time where we actually see Makima in action. And Makima is no joke whatsoever. And at this point, it's hard to even tell exactly what extent to her power she has. But after she turns back around to Kurose and Tendo and says, this is all that I can do from here. Let's go back. But yeah, and to be clear, in terms of who those death row inmates were, they were forms of sacrifices in order for Makima to use her power. I think that's obvious, but just in case I need to clarify, there you go. And also why Kurose and Tendo also had to wear blindfolds is because the higher ups demand that at least the people in their rank, they can't know the devil contracts that Makima has. But anyways, fast forwarding to Katana Man and Solitari. At this point, they're just like, oh my god, is it over? They're like the only two survivors. Inconveniently anyways, they're the only two survivors left. And as they're trying to recollect their thoughts, in the distance is Kobani. Kobani is standing there menacingly as hell. She has a knife in one hand and a walkie-talkie in another. And this is when she points at them and be like, you two are the shooters, right? And now this raises the question of how exactly Kobeni lived. And it's pretty unfortunate. What ends up happening is Arai he shot first and he shot in the neck. And who ends up shooting him is the old woman that they were assisting earlier on in the previous episode. Now, the problem is, after he's shot in the neck, he stumbles in front of Kobeni. And he's shot again in the head. But this does actually end up saving Kobeni's life. And I like to believe that he did that on purpose, knowing that they were being shot at and he tried to get her out of harm's way. But anyways, cutting back to the present, Sawatari ends up summoning the Snake Devil one more time and six it on Kobeni. And Kobeni, this is the one time that I'm just like, holy shit, finally, you know. She gets into action and she's able to dodge the Snake Devil. And as she's actively being shot at by the Katana Man, she slices off his hand, catches the gun in midair, shoots Katana Man in his back, and then aims her gun at Sawatari and tries to shoot her, but Sawatari is able to drive away. Kobeni is just left alone with half of Denji, and she apologizes to him for trying to murder him back in episode 5 and episode 6. Throughout this entire inner monologue that she's having, actually I'm pretty sure it's external, but anyways, she is just freaking out and she just admits, this life isn't for me, this job is going to drive me crazy. And then she ends off by saying, I'm going to have to tell Himeno that I quit the next time I see her. But the problem is, Himeno's already gone. But anyways, back at the train station, I believe, is when we are introduced to another member of Division 4 who is all bloodied himself, and he's face to face with Makima. And on both sides of her is Tendo and Kurose. And he is reporting that all of Division 4, most of Division 4 is dead. And that Divisions 1, 2, and 3 are being absorbed into Division 4 that will be ran by none other than Makima. And then after he reports that, this is when he formally resigns to Makima, and before she is able to leave, he asks Makima and just straight up says, how much did you know was going to happen today? And to that, it's probably one of the coldest responses, but she says, I'm sorry, I can't divulge that sort of information to a private citizen, because he had resigned. And then that's when she takes her leave with Tendo and Kurose. And as they're going down this little escalator, Tendo and Kurose are just like, you do know that we're only here for training purposes, right? We don't work under you. And then Makima's just like, damn, well, that's a shame. The food in Tokyo is to die for. And that's how the episode ends. So throughout all the chaos, the only people that survive are our core people. We have Aki still alive, we have Power still alive, we have Denji still alive, and Kobeni still alive. Everybody else is gone. But yeah, that's episode 9. Alright, so now moving on to episode 10, we are in the hospital where Aki wakes up to both Denji and Power in his room, eating his apples and also reading manga. While the two of them are arguing, Aki asks them who all survived. And this is where Denji says that it was only him, Kobeni, Power, and also, of course, the guy named Madoka who quit. And obviously, when it comes to just the overwhelming loss that Aki has experienced, he is just emotionally drained. And then out of the kindness of Denji's heart, he leaves Aki some apples, and both he and Power leave the room. Now, when Aki is alone, this is when Aki grabs the nail sword that he used against Katana Man, and he summons the Curse Devil, and he asks the Curse Devil, how many years do I have left? And the Curse Devil tells him 2. And upon this realization, Aki just resheaths the sword and lights his last cigarette that Himeno gave him. And this is where he finally breaks down and begins to cry. Denji does actually come back for a manga that he left inside his room, but he does stop at the door because he can hear Aki crying, and then that's when he decides to just leave it alone. But to that emotional response, Denji is wondering why he isn't crying like Aki and why he isn't sad. And he begins to ask himself, is this because he has no heart anymore? And if that's the reason why he can't feel sadness. Despite being able to build some type of relationship with Himeno, he never got to that emotional depth for him to feel that sadness that Aki feels. But anyways, fast forward, Aki is then visited by Tendo and Kurose, and they say that Makima sent them. And they also ask if Aki is considering quitting, where Aki says no, because his goal is still very much to defeat the Gun Devil. But upon hearing that, they tell Aki, you are too weak to fight, and at the very least, you need a new, stronger devil contract. They then tell him that they'll return tomorrow to begin the actual process of getting him a stronger devil. Then pushing along forward, we are then at a scene where Makima is with both Power and Denji, who is visiting a cemetery to meet with someone. And that someone actually turns out to be Himeno's master, Kishibe. And the reason why we're here is because Makima wants Kishibe to mentor and train Power and Denji. And then once Makima is able to get them formally acquainted, she leaves everything to him and goes on her way. Now, Kishibe cuts straight to the point and he asks them some pretty straightforward questions. The first one is how they feel about their teammates dying. And they both say that they're either indifferent or they just simply thought, oh no, they died. Literally, that's what Power said. The next one I think he asked is like, do you want revenge? And then the other one is, which side are you on? The side of the humans or the side of the devils? Denji says he is on the side of whoever feeds him, while Power says whoever is winning. So, for Kishibe anyways, he considers that a good thing, and he says, great, you two are perfectly insane, and they pass his little questionnaire. And upon that point on, training begins, and this Kishibe is no joke. So the first thing he does, and I think this was such a cool way to introduce his strength, is he actually walks up to them, puts one arm over each of them, to do like something like a group hug. And as he hugs them, he snaps their necks instantly. And now as they're dropped onto the ground immobile, Kishibe is so happy, and he says, he's never had toys that were nearly immortal because all they need is blood and then they're back and up and ready to go. So this is going to be a good opportunity for him to really whip them into shape to the level of strength that they need to be in order to take on stronger devils. Now, in regards to Kishibe's status, he is known, and he also personally thinks of himself as well as the strongest devil hunter for years. So he's kind of pitching to them how much of an honor this is for them to be given this opportunity to learn from the best. And honestly, he really is the best. But yeah, so at the end of the day, he is just happy that he has toys that he can't break. So let's get training. Now, when I said earlier that his training is going to be intense, I mean intense. He intends to kill them every day until they become strong enough to fight real threats. And oh my God, the training has already begun. They're already getting a good taste of how insanely combat experienced Kishibe is, to the point where later on, once Kishibe concludes the training for the day, Power suggests just running away because she doesn't see a way for them to get out of this or even defeating this guy. And so now it's nighttime and they both have to walk back home just to do it all over again the next day. And this is where they both put their big thinking caps on and try to devise a plan in order for them to actually stand a chance against Kishibe. Because if they don't, that means that this is just going to keep going and going and going. And it's basically like torture because he could just keep killing them over and over and over again. But yeah, their decision is made and they agree to use their brains to beat Kishibe. And then the next morning we have them both wearing glasses to show how smart they've become and how much they've been thinking about this, to really, really encapsulate being two superior beings using their full brain power. And once Kishibe goes over to their apartment, well, Aki's apartment, to get Power and Denji for their next training session, they launch a surprise attack. And the moment that he gets to their door, Power creates this blood spear and she just chucks it at the door, and it pierces through the door. And honestly, it's a perfect shot. If it was anyone other than Kishibe, they would have been dead. But Kishibe has ridiculous reflexes, and he's actually impressed. Now, as for where Denji is one level above where Kishibe is. The reason for this is because they plan on launching an attack from two different fronts. One in front of him, and Denji is actually going to drop down from the second floor, well, from the floor above them, and try to attack from the back. But the thing is, Kishibe is ready for that. But this plan is very smart. Power also set up some bottles on the floor above them as well, and it's filled with her blood, and she commands the blood downwards in order to pierce through the ceiling to hopefully get the jump on Kishibe that way. But that doesn't work, and Kishibe, again, he has insanely quick reflexes, and he thwarts every single blood spear that shot at him from above. And he's still quick enough to react to Denji, who has dropped down from the floor above, and he roundhouse kicks Denji in the chin. And this discombobulates him. It knocks the glasses off his face too, and Denji is left on the ground. And in regards to Power, she is anemic now because she used too much blood for this ambush, basically. Now, he says that, this was a very good attempt by you guys. So that'll conclude the training for today. And the two take that momentary victory of, thank God, we don't have to go through that really long training session again. But before Kishibe turns the corner, he does finish off Denji, and he tells him, never trust a hunter. And that's how that scene ends. God, I love Kishibe so much. All right, now so let's catch up with Aki, because it's the next day, and it is finally time for Aki to find a stronger devil to contract. Oh my God, and I almost forgot that Himeno's sister visits Aki while he's in the hospital, and they have been writing one another, and more specifically, these letters were pertaining to Aki. And she says that it's good for Aki to also read these letters, so Aki does so. And reading these letters, it's shown that Himeno was talking to her sister about ways to try to get Aki to quit. And overall, these letters are just actively showing how much she cared for Aki's well-being and didn't want him to continue doing this job, especially going after something as dangerous as the Gun Devil, when he could just be living a fulfilling life that isn't fueled by getting revenge. But yeah, I'm so glad that they added that scene to give Himeno more substance and also show how much she thought about Aki and cared about his well-being. And the devil that ends up being chosen is pretty interesting. It is the Future Devil. So in terms of the Future Devil, he has two other hunters that have devil contracts with him. One had to offer half their lifespan, while the other had to give both eyes, their taste, and sense of smell. So this devil is not very gracious when it comes to what he demands from the hunter to form a contract. It's nothing like the Fox Devil, where Aki just had to give a piece of flesh from his arm. This go around, it's Aki's turn, and let's see exactly what the Future Devil demands of Aki. Aki is led in this dark ass cell where a strange devil is just peering at him with one eyeball. And that is where the episode ends. And this brings us to episode 11, and the Future Devil is an interesting character. Let me tell you this. This dude is, when I first heard of the Future Devil and what he demanded from people, I expected him to be very intimidating and scary. And he does look pretty scary, but he really does subvert your expectations with his almost enthusiastic voice. Like, it's very playful, and he dances and everything, and he just keeps saying over and over, the future rules, and, all this stuff. So already it's just completely taken me off guard. But in regards to what the Future Devil requires from Aki here. Before the future devil is able to figure out what he wants to get from Aki, he tells them that he needs to peer into his future first. And for him to do that, Aki needs to look inside of his chest so he can look through Aki's future. And then afterwards, once he's looked at it, this is how he's going to figure out, okay, I want this from you, I want this from you, I want this from you. So once Aki obliges, the future devil just begins to laugh. And this is where I personally got a little nervous because I'm just like, oh shit. And then when Aki takes his head out, the future devil says, you know what? I will just ask one thing from you. Let me live inside of you. That's all he wants in exchange for his power. And he is just confused. And the future devil just simply says, your death is going to be the fucking worst. And the future devil does offer to tell him more, but Aki just simply says that he does not care. And in regards to the price that Aki has to pay, all that the future devil is asking for, again, is to live in his right eye. And this is just in order for the future devil to bear witness to Aki's death. And Aki agrees. All right, now checking back up on Power and Denji and their training with Kishibe. Kishibe is actually impressed with their progress, and he says that they have been moving up to now only being required to do one training with him per week. And they take this as a massive win. But he does take this moment to warn them that in regards to their actual enemies that they'll have to face, which is the Katana Man and also the Snake Devil, those two are not no joke. They're very dangerous. So basically don't slack off. Like, if you are going to fight them, you better win, or I'm going to have to come in and kill them myself. Afterwards, Kishibe meets with Makima privately, and you can tell that they don't have the best relationship, but Kishibe doesn't waste any time, and he hints that he knew about the ambush, or more specifically, that he knows that Makima knew about the ambush and that she didn't do anything to stop it. And to that, Kishibe does tell Makima, I don't care how many of my people die as long as it's for the good of humanity. And Makima claims that she just wants what's best for the public, for the people. And she wants to save as many people as possible. But to that, she says that if this mission succeeds, then Division 4 will gain a lot more power and a lot more freedom than they have right now. And after hearing Makima's lip service, Kishibe calls her out and just says, you're lying. And to that, Makima just smiles and doesn't deny a thing. And now it is time for us to catch up with Katana Man and Sawatari. And they're talking about Makima and the fact that right now she cannot be killed and she'll likely find them wherever they go. But despite that, they do sort of have an edge, knowing the fact that the old Yakuza boss, aka Katana Man's grandfather, he left behind a backup devil contract. And that devil contract was in reference to the zombie devil. And it's revealed that they have a underground zombie army made from gangsters and everybody who owed him money. And there are an insane amount of zombies in this building. Like, I think it's in the thousands. All things considered, when it comes to Makima, they do think that they're prepared to take on public safety. Now back over with Aki, he's in the car with both Tendo and Kurose, and Kurose asks if he truly believes that they can take down the Gun Devil. And this is especially considering the fact that Aki did get defeated by someone that is much weaker currently than the Gun Devil. But Aki shows once again that he does not care about the odds or how strong something is. He's determined to do so. And after making that clear, Aki gets out of the car and heads inside the Public Safety HQ. And now let's go ahead and jump on with Makima, who is meeting with the mob boss, and she is surrounded by all the mob bosses and henchmen and all that stuff, and he is claiming that the attack on Division 4 was done by a rogue faction and not on his orders. He then shows Makima a picture of Sawatari, and he says that the Gun Devil gave them guns, ammo, and 20,000 yen each. And then after giving Makima that intel, she goes a step further and asks for him to provide her with a list of names with everyone who was involved, plus all of their families. And to that, the boss refuses, saying that that would start a war against his faction and the rogue faction. And he defends his decision by saying that this is a necessary evil in order to protect Japan from foreign mafias. And then Makima is not coming around to play, and so she pulls out a bag, places it on the table, and at first the mob boss thinks that this is meant to be a bribe, and he laughs it off, and the men around her also laughs it off, like, ha ha ha. And then Makima opens the bag and reveals that these are the eyes of their loved ones. And she says if he cooperates, she has someone within public safety that can return the things that were lost, alluding to the eyeballs, and she'll happily give them back. Now this makes everyone panic, and one of the guys behind Makima tries to swing at her, but Makima uses her power, and this dude just suddenly collapses on the ground and begins to bleed from his nose and his mouth. And then in response to the mob boss's earlier statement, she replies by saying, "This country does not need necessary evils. We can just decide what's necessary." We'll see later on if the mob boss is now willing to play ball. But anyways, it is time for us to jump back on with Kishibe, who is leading the assault against Sawatari and Katana Man. And this is where we are introduced to even more characters. And oh my gosh, I am excited for these people. Now the first one that we meet is the Shark Fiend. And the Shark Fiend is able to swim through walls, and he has the head of a shark. The next one that we see is the Violence Fiend, and the Violence Fiend is straight up hands. And he wears one of those gas masks because what the gas mask does is it pushes out gas into his mask in order to make him weaker, because otherwise he'd be way too strong to handle. The next one is the Spider Devil, not Fiend, but Devil. And her top half looks like a human, but where she becomes a spider is the legs, and oh my god. And my last one is a personal favorite. It is the Angel Devil, and the Angel Devil has the ability to drain one's life by a single touch. But the thing is, the Angel Devil is very lazy, but he's strong. So, hey, get him motivated and you have a real problem on your hands. And then of course we have our main trio, Aki, Power, and Denji. Oh, and also Kobani's there as well. So Aki tells the three of them that they're going to be splitting up. More specifically, he tells Power and Kobani to let the fiends and the Spider Devil handle the zombies while they go after Katana Man and Sawatari. But since they don't know their location, they're going to be splitting up. So Aki makes his way to the 4th floor, I believe. And this is where he encounters his first enemy. And the man tries to shoot at Aki, but Aki is able to dodge it and knock him out. Then 4 more men come out of a room, and right before Aki is able to do anything, they all begin to bleed out of the nose and they collapse. Gee, I wonder who did that. Aki then continues his search, and he's the one that actually ends up finding Sawatari. He tries to get her to cooperate, but she's just like, absolutely not. And she summons the Snake Devil. And what really trips Aki up here is that she is commanding the Snake Devil to spit it out. And what she is talking about turns out to be the Ghost Devil. And this is where Sawatari commands the Ghost Devil to kill Aki. So now the Ghost Devil is attacking Aki, and Aki is doing a pretty good job attacking its arms and stuff, and he is revealed to be using the Future Devil's abilities. And the Future Devil's abilities allow him to peek a couple of seconds forward into the future, and that gives him a combat advantage knowing where things are going to strike. But the problem is the Ghost Devil has so many arms that Aki can't dodge them all, and he ends up getting caught. So now the Ghost Devil is holding Aki by his neck, and Sawatari commands the Ghost Devil to choke Aki to death. And that is the end of episode 11. Season finale time. Moving on to episode 12, we proceed with seeing Aki being strangled to death by the Ghost Devil. And as he's dying, he remembers a flashback with Himeno. More specifically, he remembers a time where Himeno told him that the Ghost Devil doesn't have any eyes. So instead, it senses fear in people. Meaning, in order to efficiently fight the Ghost Devil, you have to not be afraid. So upon remembering that, Aki calms himself down, And no longer sensing fear in Aki, the ghost devil ends up releasing him, and she extends her hand out to Aki and opens it, and it's shown that in one of its hands is a cigarette, and written on it, it says "Easy Revenge." Aki then puts the cigarette in his pocket, and then he calmly goes up to the ghost devil, says internally to Himeno that he plans on joining her soon, then he cuts off the ghost devil's head. Now, in regards to Sawatari, she is surprised by what's happening. And the moment that Sawatari is snapping back out of it, Kobani is actually behind her. And Aki stops Kobani from killing Sawatari. He then asks Kobani why she decided to stay in public safety. And Kobani's reason is just simply that they'll be getting their bonuses soon, so she decided might as well wait those out. Meanwhile, Power and Denji are on an elevator, and Power, she has, I think it's like a zombie's arm, and she's just snacking on it. And Denji is just disgusted. But she's just like, meat's meat. But anyways, they stop on a floor that is absolutely just full with zombies. And Denji is just like, shh, don't make no noise. While Power, being Power, she blitzes out loud as ever, and she just declares, "I am Power," and she just goes straight into battle. But she thinks Denji is with her, but Denji stayed on the elevator and he just continues to ride up while Power is just going crazy. But anyways, Denji reaches the top floor, and that is where he comes face to face with Katana Man. And now it's time for round 2. And Katana Man does try to talk to Denji, trying to say, hey, me and you, we're the same, we're similar. And he's trying to get Denji to surrender, but Denji's just like, absolutely not. So both of them now understanding that there's no way out of this, they both transform and the fight ensues once more. And it is intense. They both burst through the building and are free falling while they're still fighting in midair until they reach a rooftop, and then they jump from rooftop to rooftop, and then they jump onto a moving train and fight up there. Like, it is ridiculous. But Katana Man does get the best of Denji for a moment, and he's able to slice off Denji's arms. And oh my god, I feel just horrible for these passengers. They didn't ask for any of this. But the fight just keeps going on, and Katana Man is just trying to get Denji to apologize for killing his grandfather. And Denji's just like, what you mean? He tried to kill me first. And then they keep continuing to fight until Katana Man gets back into that scary ass stance where he, appears behind somebody because he moves so fast. And at this point, Denji's just like, that move should be considered cheating. But Katana Man does it, and realizing that Katana Man is going to go for his head because that's where he believes the only chainsaw is because his arms are gone, Katana Man thinks, oh, this is an easy win. But Denji reveals that was just a decoy. And he says, beasts don't trust hunters. And then that's when Denji reveals that he is able to make his legs into chainsaws as well. And the Katana Man is just sliced clean in half. So anyways, fast forward, and Katana Man is subdued, and Denji tells Aki that prison is just too easy for him, and tries to remind him, hey, this is the guy that killed Himeno, trying to get some sort of emotion out of Aki, but Aki tries to remain calm and composed. This is where Denji proposes a little contest. And that contest is who can make him scream louder by kicking him in the balls. Aki does hesitate, and originally he wasn't going to do it. And he pulls out the cigarette that says Easy Revenge on it. And he thinks about it for a second like, easy revenge, huh? And then he puts the cigarette back in his pocket. And then he looks back towards Denji and says, what do I get if I win? And Denji's just like, his balls. And this is where Himeno's Requiem begins. And both Aki and Denji take turns just hitting Katana Man in the nuts. And throughout it all, it's just making the little loud bell ding noises like bing. And Katana Man is just screaming in agony. And I actually do like this moment because you're able to see some level of joy coming out of Aki in this moment. But anyways, mission success, and Makima is debriefing the higher ups on the events of the mission. Starting out with what happened to Sawatari, she says that Sawatari had a contract with the Gun Devil, and that she's the one that gave guns to the Yakuza in order to collect the Gun Devil's flesh. She also confirms that she's the one that wanted Denji's heart, or more specifically, the Chainsaw Devil's heart. But before they could question Sawatari, she was killed by her own Snake Devil. And they just sum that up to something like a contingency plan if she were to be captured. But overall, they were able to recover 1.4 kilograms of the Gun Devil's flesh. And combining that with the older pieces that they already had, it was now strong enough to point towards the Gun Devil's location. So now that means there's no longer a reason for them to blindly search for the Gun Devil. So now it's finally time to wind down and get a sense of normalcy after all the chaos. And Aki, Power, and Denji have dinner, and it's so relaxing that you almost forget everything that's happened over the past 4 episodes. But overall, man, it feels good to finally just get this silence. But anyways, back to the episode. Later that night, Aki decides to go out on the balcony, and he pulls out the Easy Revenge cigarette that he got from the Ghost Devil. He lights it and finally smokes it in remembrance of Himeno. As for Denji and Power, they remain sleeping inside. But that moment with the cigarette is meant to signify that Aki is finally accepting everything that happened, and he is deciding to move forward. It doesn't change his motive, of course. He's 100% still wanting to go after the Gun Devil, but he is finally grieving and moving on with the acceptance phase. But the episode is not over yet. Do you remember in episode 1 where we open up the entire series with that dream that Denji has walking down the alleyway? Well, he has it again. And this time, once he reaches the door, Pochita is on the other side of it, and it is telling Denji, never open this door. Don't open it. And Denji, confused, he's just staring at it, almost conflicted, and that's when the dream ends. And then for the final tease that is actually playing into movie territory is we see this woman who is walking alone, and she's walking down a street and approaching a building. I would say what that building is, but that might not be obvious to everybody, so I won't go that far. But she thinks to herself, Denji, would you rather be a country mouse or a city mouse? And that is how the season ends. And oh my god, that is all of Chainsaw Man Season 1, Episode 1 through 12, recapped. Whew, I can't believe I did this all in one sitting. Y'all should be proud of me. I won't tell you how long I've been recording though. But anyways, it's now finally time to watch the movie. Hopefully by the time you're seeing this, it is slowly creeping up to October 24th. But I've watched the trailer for it. I've read the manga, of course, and I'm not worried at all. I just know it's going to be good. So I'll see you guys on the other side, and expect a recap, expect a review, and I can't wait to hear what y'all think about it. See you then.